So thank you for tuning in to Chompin at the Bit once again. I am Kyle Edwards, of course. This is episode number 71. So in this episode, kind of want to change it up just a little bit. Now don't worry, it's still going to be sports. Don't worry about that. But I kind of want to take a look at social issues and kind of like when they cross over into the sports world. And then on top of that, when that does happen, kind of what kind of reaction comes about from that. Which that may sound a little confusing right now, but as I talk about it, you'll probably understand it a little better. Now, like I know in the NBA, there was the big James Harden trade and all that. I will talk about that definitely tomorrow's episode, because there's a lot to unpack there, as well as some other NBA stuff I do want to talk about. But like I said, it's mainly because, we all know what happened last Wednesday with all that stuff down at the Capitol and all the aftermath from that event. And, just another side note here. Like, I'm not turning it into, political podcast or anything like that. I'm not trying to, condemn whatever your political views are, because I truly believe you can vote for who you vote for, as long as you understand why you are voting for whatever. And then you can have any party affiliation that you want. I don't care. That's part of it being a free country. But I do want to talk about the interesting aspect where, because we've seen it even before last Wednesday, you can go back several years. You can also kind of stick with recent history. Seems like it's been kind of a thing that's come about, especially in, the Trump presidency, of course. But you saw it in Obama's presidency. And I want to say even going back to Bush, you started seeing a little bit more of, athletes voicing their opinion based off of stuff that was going on politically, socially, even like economically, stuff like that. So for me, what I find fascinating is whenever you have one of these big events come up, which, I will constantly look at, sports stories on like a sports video on YouTube. Then I'll go in the comment section, and depending on what the subject is, I'll kind of put a comment in there and kind of see what happens with it. And, some of you may have heard when I first started the podcast, that's kind of what led to me wanting to do this podcast, because I, will put comments under videos and then see reactions from that and get conversations going. So this is just me taking that to the next level. But the conversations a lot of times, whenever social issues are coming up, it seems like you see a real divide in terms of social media and all that, where the ones who are probably lean one way politically, are definitely in support of social change and all that kind of stuff, while those who are on the other side politically, usually they either want to downplay it or they don't think it's an issue. So I think it's really interesting how the sports world can get so polarizing when politics and social issues become part of the equation. Now you're probably asking, like, just get specific, like what exactly you're talking about. Well, you can start back with probably when a lot of this really came to a head was with the whole Colin Kaepernick situation. Now, we all understood. Well, I can't say we all understood, because when you heard a lot of the people talking about Colin Kaepernick, you realized that there was some type of disconnect. Not really saying in terms of, Colin's message or Eric Reed, who was right there with him, but in the way that that message was being perceived outside of the sports world was clearly very polarizing. Because you had those who, I guess, went along with Trump's view, because we remember, you had the president who was actively commenting on the issue of Colin Kaepernick kneeling before NFL games and talking about how it was wrong, disrespectful, and all this kind of stuff, even though it was told like a million times that what he was doing was actually not disrespectful in any way. He had talked to military people. They were fine with it. But somehow that aspect of it, because the president was now inserting himself into the story, and we know about his following and all that stuff, how he's really popular on that side, they all turned it into, you have to stand for the anthem or you're like spitting in the face of the country, even though it had nothing to do with it. Then it became stories of, I have a brother in the military and how could you do this and do that? And it was just getting way out of proportion and all that. But then we can look at probably something on the other side where, like, I went back to even when, you all remember Tim Tebow, what they call him, like touchdown Jesus or something, because even from his time in Florida, he would score touchdowns, takes a knee in the end zone, he would pray and all that kind of stuff. He was seen as like a true American, this great person for doing that, expressing his beliefs openly, not backing away from it, not being ashamed to talk about it. And, I gave Tebow a lot of credit for that, because it was refreshing to see somebody who was, religious and was open with it out there in the public eye. I get it. But it was funny that, and not to say that Tebow didn't have some people who, didn't like it, but it feels like the people who opposed what he was doing was a much smaller crowd than what you're getting with today's athletes. So Tebow did it. People loved it. But you have athletes now kneeling for what they believe in on a national stage, bringing some eyes to it. But yet there's a lot of people who just don't like what they're seeing. And I find it interesting because it's something where you have two very similar acts, but they get way you get different reactions to the point where it's like one end of the spectrum compared to the other. Yes, there's, I guess, several like obvious reasons why you could see the reactions from one way or the other. You could look at it as political lines, racial lines if you want to go there, or just the fact that with social media becoming even more of a bigger aspect of our lives, it's just that more people are just willing to voice their opinion. So like I said, Tebow seen as this great American because he was praying and all this kind of stuff. Athletes today kneel and it seems like it's disrespectful to the military, to the flag, to the anthem, to this, to that, to the other. Even though a lot of athletes tell you why they're doing whatever they're doing. And the weirdest thing is that some of the athletes who are kneeling are actually praying as well. But it seems like, well, I guess it was just to make the story move along here. Black athletes kneeling, issue. Tebow, who was a Southern white guy, the whole Bible Belt in the South, so he was seen as a hero. But my issue is, what's really the point of, trying to like censor people or stop them from, expressing themselves? Because as we've seen over these past few years, I mean, these athletes have the right to do what they're doing. Their messages are great because, for people like myself, as a black person, there's plenty of social issues and all that kind of stuff in the world today that, I mean, you'd have to be pretty much blind not to see where these athletes feel like it's their responsibility to speak up. But the thing that really does get me is whenever these social issues happen, you can kind of count on your hand which athletes will probably be the first ones to speak out about it. Usually you'll see like LeBron. Then like NFL wise, you'll see like Malcolm Jenkins, guys like that. Jaylen Brown, who has become one of those athletes who speaks out a lot. And, from this past summer when he made his drive from Boston to Atlanta to, take part in a peaceful protest in Atlanta. Some people viewed it as, good for him. He was, living what he usually speaks about. But then a lot of times you get this common comment from people on the other side where they're just like, oh, you can't have politics in sports. This is why I don't watch. That's not what you're supposed to use your platform for. Which I think is really hypocritical because, once again, looking at current president, he used his platform all the time to spread his beliefs, whether it was, I don't have to get into all the political stuff, but we know what he talked about a lot of times when he got in front of the microphone. Well, I guess we'll tie it into the sports world. He was famous for saying NFL teams should kick any player that kneels out of the league. That's spreading his belief. He inserted himself into the story saying that if he were the owner of a team or a league, he wouldn't even allow a player on anything he owned who kneeled during the anthem. As I said before, he changed the whole narrative of what the kneeling was about and then made it like his political soapbox to bring in support and votes and all that kind of stuff. So for him, and mind you, once again, president of the country, spreading his beliefs far and wide, no problem from those who had problems with these athletes doing it. This is where I'm saying the hypocrisy comes into the whole equation. But yeah, so just getting back, like I said, they always come with, this is why I don't watch your sport, even though they'll sit there and read the story about it and then comment on it. So clearly you probably do watch it. You just don't want the fact that they're speaking out and stuff that you may not necessarily see with your eyes somehow, because, and this is another common one you'll see, oh, well, you I mean, you make millions in your life. What's so difficult with doing that when you're doing it just playing a game? Which is the one that gets me the most, because I don't understand where it's because you make this amount of money, you are no longer allowed to speak as if you're not a human being seeing what's going on in the world. And just say, I love the fact that athletes are willing to, speak up on what they believe. Because it was something that I think before some athletes did stay away from, because before it was frowned upon, and you may lose sponsors and all this kind of stuff. So, they weren't really in the right place to do it. Whereas now, depending on what league you're in, of course, because Adam Silver in the NBA, he encourages it. He wants his players speaking out. He supports them, as we saw with the whole bubble experience, which that turned into a whole thing as well, where just the simple fact of athletes putting messages on the back of their jersey rubbed people the wrong way. Putting, Black Lives Matter on the court rubbed people the wrong way. The players locking arms and all that before the game starts rubbed people the wrong way. Even though, for most of you who watch the games, you rarely see the national anthem during an NFL game, unless it's the Super Bowl. And then NBA games, you see it more often, mainly in the playoffs. Although NBA players mainly will stand for it and kind of lock arms or whatever. So that part, I guess, whatever, is a little different. But like I said, the NBA encourages it. And NFL, the NFL, like I said, with the whole Colin Kaepernick thing, they definitely shied away from embracing it at that point. And we understood why. A lot of the owners were Trump supporters. If not, they at least were affiliated with the same party. And with Trump making it a big story, I think, Goodell and some of those owners were afraid to kind of oppose Trump at that point. Only, I'm sure it's for financial reasons. The NFL, just it like a tax-free league or something like that, so it's probably tied into that. But even with that, a lot of that has, well, I guess before I move on, looking at other sports, if you look at soccer, they are open with their stances on social issues. And once again, I'm mainly talking about like recently, because it seems like it's become even bigger now. Back in the day, I don't really know what soccer players really did, unless of course it was something that happened in their country, of course. But it seems like this summer it started becoming a worldwide issue. And then other sports like NASCAR, which, if you determine that a sport or not, or hockey, even baseball, MLB had players who wanted to kneel or show some type of support, but the league and their teams weren't really supporting them, so a lot of the players didn't do anything. And then the ones that did, it seemed like their teammates weren't supporting them. But then again, baseball kind of screws up the way they handle a lot of things, media-wise, socially, so it was par for the course for them. NHL, which we know is mainly Canadian, European type league. They for the most part, they kind of avoided really demonstrating in any way. And then when they did do it, it was kind of like thrown together towards the end. But when it comes to sports, of course, most eyes are on the NBA and NFL. But then you start seeing NBA and NFL players crossing over into other sports. As I just mentioned with NASCAR, there was the instance with Bubba Wallace where he found, or his crew or something, saw a rope tied in the garage that looked like a noose. Bubba Wallace being one of the few black drivers in NASCAR. Of course, it became a big story. And once again, that other side was coming in full force talking about how, oh, Bubba Wallace is just trying to make a story of this. It's not even a big deal. That's how people tie ropes in NASCAR, which I thought was hilarious because I'm pretty sure if that's the way it was supposed to be tied, it wouldn't have been a big deal. But it was only because I don't really follow NASCAR like that. So it wasn't until I was watching, I think it was ESPN one day, and they had Marty Smith on, who's a guy who follows NASCAR, and he was clearly upset by it. Now, mind you, he's a white reporter, but like I'm trying to avoid making it a whole race thing, but I mean, you know where it's coming from. But when he did the report on it, and he said that when he saw the pictures of what was in the garage, he's been around the sport for like 20, 25 years, and he had never seen a rope tied that way. So when I heard it, then I was like, okay, so now you see where Bubba Wallace is coming from. And then all these other people who are trying to say like he's trying to make it into something more than that, it just made me think back to the whole NBA, NFL, where it's the whole, you know, keep your politics out of our sport. But then again, NASCAR has its own issues because, I mean, they were still waving Confederate flags even though Bubba Wallace was racing in the races every week. NASCAR eventually told them to stop waving the flag. That turned into a whole issue where they were like, well, this is the tradition of our sport, the tradition of the South, since NASCAR is mainly a Southern fan base. You know, why are you taking away our proud history? Which, saying that out loud, it's baffling that your proud history goes back to a time when there was such divide and segregation and all that. So when that side wants to come out and say stuff like that, how, you know, people can't understand where black athletes, and, you know, not to like single out, but there are plenty of white teammates of the black athletes that, you know, kneel with them, go arm in arm with them, during protests will show up with them. So just to give them credit, let me say that. But yeah, it's just crazy that a lot of this stems from these people on that side that just want to always bring up like it's part of proud history. Yeah, maybe proud to them because it benefited them, but saying that in the face of like a black athlete, how do you think they're supposed to feel with that? So, you know, just kind of going along with that, it's just like, it's something that I feel like is going to be a thing going forward, because a lot of the issues that these athletes are talking about are going to be issues for years to come. Once again, because of current president has really, you know, emboldened a lot of these people to continue to, you know, run the same cliche lines out whenever athletes want to speak about it. And we even saw it come to a head with LeBron, where he spoke out. What was it? I mean, there's so many examples. I don't know if it was either might have been the Breonna Taylor case, situation, whatever you want to call it, where LeBron and a lot of players were, I think that's when they were wearing the t-shirts like "Say Her Name" and all that kind of stuff, to which, the other side made it seem like, Breonna Taylor was a, criminal and all that. So they thought these black athletes trying to make her out to be the victim was a disgrace and all this kind of stuff. Well, from that, there was the quote that came out, "Shut up and dribble," which I think was from somebody on Fox News or something like that. And I think that kind of, encapsulates where all of this is going and kind of the purpose of this episode, where, I do hope, and I know it's going to continue, but I hope that athletes don't just, shut up and dribble or just throw footballs and be quiet, because I do think it's important that if they are truly affected by all this stuff, which they are, then they have the same right voicing their opinion as the other side feels like they have to tell them that they don't need to. And once again, it's just the weird world that we're in right now, because you would think, just on the surface, the fact that black minority athletes are given a voice to, other black and minority people because they have a bigger platform than, you or I have, and they, want to fight for equal rights and all that kind of stuff, that it would be something that everybody would get behind. But unfortunately, we have a lot of people who are set in their ways, and whether it's from outside reasons like family values and all that kind of stuff, that they view the world one way. But you have, like I said, a group of people who are now making it their mission to constantly speak out, be leaders for those communities as well. And I think it's a great thing. And even tying it back, more towards sports. I'm sure from those of you who are on here, you've heard me talk about LeBron a lot. And, I'm not one of those fans of LeBron who's blind and blindly think he's the greatest ever. Because I don't. I see flaws with him, and I'm not afraid to say that. But I think on this issue, where, he inserts himself in a lot of these social things, I agree that he's had a very big impact along those lines, and I think that's a great thing for him. It's great for his legacy, because we know he's big in the community with, the schools in Akron and all that kind of stuff. So I think he's definitely in a position where, you could put him up there as basically a community leader. So you have to give him props for that. Oh, but then saying that made me think of, one last thing, because once again, in light of last Wednesday, another popular comment I kept seeing was, well, why don't these athletes, go in their community and stop ruining our sports by talking about it and be about it? That comment as well kind of made me upset, because that just shows that they don't, want to recognize what a lot of these athletes do. Yes, they play a sport, which is just a game, and they get paid a lot, which, if you're into finance and economics and all that kind of stuff, technically what they get paid is reasonable based off of what the league makes, but that's for another time. But to sit here and act like these athletes don't work in their communities and are just paying lip service to something that they aren't truly about is, I think, a reckless comment, and is one of those that really needs to stop. Because even like for all the community work these athletes do, whether it's giving away turkeys Thanksgiving, or passing out gifts to children's hospitals and stuff, Christmas and stuff like that, or what I'm sure a lot of these people on the other side don't recognize, there's been a lot of NFL and NBA players who have actually created community programs to try to help with the whole police brutality thing, because a lot of these athletes are under the impression that if you build that community connection between police officers in the community and the people, that kind of does away with a lot of the police brutality stuff. Makes sense. Like I said, a lot of them have implemented programs like that, but to those on the other side, they're not going to go ahead and look that up because they get their views from certain sources that don't recognize what these athletes are doing in their community. So why would they care to go out of their way to research it? And even like other ways, you have some athletes like Work Done, which I learned a lot about, what Work Done actually was doing when I moved down here, where he I think it was like in off seasons when he was playing. I think he's still doing it, but he would like help out single parents and all that kind of stuff, help them out getting a house, because that's another issue with a lot of this that athletes do talk about, with opportunities granted to minority people. So a lot of them do that kind of stuff in their community to help out that way. And there's endless other ones, but main point is, for a lot of these, people who don't want to recognize it, I guess main thing is, for those of you listening, feel free, jumping in the comments whenever people do get reckless like that, and fire back at them, because I do it all the time. Mainly to see if any of them will respond. A lot of times, they don't, because, and let's face it, there's a lot of people on social media who are just trolling, which is, you can do whatever you want. That's fine. I don't care. But you do notice sometimes that some of them other ones who kind of put a certain tone behind the comments they put, that they're not trolling and that they're flat out telling you what they believe. Those are the ones I think you can definitely engage into some back and forth comment wise. Some of them you just kind of let them go because it's just too much to handle. But yeah, so hopefully you enjoyed me rambling on for a little over 30 minutes about that. It was just that, I guess, just to tie a bow on this whole thing. It's been something that I've thought about, coming on here with for some time now, but after the stuff from Wednesday, it seemed like it was taken to a whole nother level. So because of that, I kind of wanted to work it in. And plus, with it being middle of the week, it was a nice time to take a little break and talk about something a little different that was still tied into sports. So, yeah. So the biggest thing is, now if any of you who are listening are of the belief that politics need to stay out of sports, I just leave you with the fact that you take the jersey, whatever sport they're playing, take the ball away, take the stadium away, take the fans away, you still have a human being who can recognize what's wrong with the world. And I think because they are given the ability to speak out about it, they should be given that respect and all that to, give their opinion and kind of just leave it be. So no reason to sit here and like attack people, because some of the attacks, of course, get real personal and all that, which is ridiculous. But once again, looking back on stuff that happened last Wednesday, we see that a lot of people are, I guess we'll call it, real passionate about their beliefs. So, but yeah, that's where I'll leave you with this episode. It is a topic that I may touch on again later on, so I guess let me know how you feel about this one. Like I said, may have been rambling a little bit there, but it's just something I just want to talk to you guys about real quick. So thanks for tuning in, and definitely leave a comment. Let me know how you feel. If you agree with me, you disagree. If you disagree, I can respectfully listen to how you feel about it. Best ways to reach out, of course, Facebook page, Chompin at the Bit. Go there, drop a comment. I will respond, of course. Or if you're more inclined to Twitter, you can go there, at Chompin Podcast. Follow. Give the show a follow there. Leave a comment there as well. I'll reply back as well over there. Also do polls and stuff, so definitely interact that way as well. But yeah, so thanks again. Be safe. God bless, of course, and catch you next episode. Which we will talk about the James Harden thing in the next episode, of course, because I do have a lot to say about that one. Like, I expected it, but it still kind of came out of left field. The teams that were involved, kind of surprising. So we'll get into that in the next episode, though. But yeah, so enjoy the rest of your day. I'll catch you next episode. All right.